Okay.
And it was, she got to coach, or I'm sorry, ump that one game. But there was just so much pressure on her. So, but she got that one. Yeah. And for somebody from Ernest, you know, and I often wondered if my grandfather knew her because he was an Ernest coal miner, you know. Yes!
We're going to call this meeting of the work session for March of the Indiana Borough Council to order. And because there is one item farther down the agenda that we will vote on, I'm going to ask Laura to call the roll, please.
Rod. Here. Palazzo. Here. Gebauser. Here. Ford. Present. Herring. Here. Kratza. Present. Lancaster. Here. Newell. Here. Smith. Here. Steelman. Taylor. Warnock. Here. 11 present, 1 absent.
Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? We come to the point in the meeting for public participation. For those people who don't come regularly, I remind you of the rules for public participation. You'll come to the podium, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to speak. It is not our custom to enter into a discussion with people. We'll listen attentively to what you have to say, but it's not a back and forth. So, is there anyone who would like to address the council?
Thank you. Test. Like he reads it. Marijuana.
Name and your address.
I reside at 898 Chestnut Street here in Indiana. I'm also a business owner of, we have apartments, NCK Computing and Wolfie's. Was trying to figure out how this marijuana decriminalization is better. Kind of reminds me of a paper towel situation. Used to walk in the restroom, pull out a paper towel, comes out. But now we make it motion sense. It's blinking at me. Did I wave my hand too fast? Is a battery dead? Is it out of paper towels? No, it's broken. So Joe Citizen, I don't see how this is better for anyone, from law enforcement to Joe Citizen to the people who own businesses in Indiana. Joe Citizen walks, he lights up a joint, he's in front of the carriage house, he gets the munchies, wants to go get a pizza, walks up to Papa John's, impulse the state police, you're under arrest. Why? You have marijuana. Why? It's against Pennsylvania state law. Same Joe Citizen goes to the homecoming parade. I'll token up a joint. Pennsylvania State Police are brought in to help law enforcement. That's why. Law, you're not allowed to have marijuana. We own a bar. Joe Citizen walks up to the bar. Hi, how you doing? You have to put that joint out. You can't come in here. Why? It's a Pennsylvania state liquor license. It's enforced by the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Liquor Enforcement. You have to put out that joint. You can't smoke it in here. Well, that's stupid. I agree. That's stupid.
All right, I saw you in the front next.
My name is Benjamin Blowers. I'm at 31 South 12th Street, Indiana Borough. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again as a husband, father, voter, pastor here in the borough. I want to express again my strong opposition to any consideration of decriminalizing the small amounts of marijuana. I believe this sends the wrong message to everyone, but especially our children and our youth. We tell them growing up, say no to drugs, and yet we're sending them another signal now that it's okay. Some drugs are okay, just in smaller amounts. That's the wrong message. It seems to me this entire conversation and debate got off to a shaky and far from transparent start here in Borough Council on January 18th. The most recent Sunshine Act laws seemed that they were maybe ignored or abused when official action, when a vote to authorize the solicitor to draft an ordinance was taken that evening without any notice to the public. It was not on the agenda. I have a copy of that agenda. And you read the minutes of the meeting, official action was taken to authorize that. There was nothing in the agenda. The state of Pennsylvania Open Records website says, and I quote, "The agenda should include all issues to be deliberated on and any planned official action such as votes. Some could argue, well, that was a work meeting, but the Open Records website also states, and I quote, "Official actions are not permitted at work sessions." There seems to be a consistent pattern of not being transparent. The consideration of this, we were told, resulted from letters, plural, from constituents requesting this action, but a right to know inquiry resulted in one letter from June of 2021 in support of the issue. It's also been reported in the media that no one from this council ever reached out to those in our court or justice system or to other law enforcement agencies to get their professional input. When the school district expressed their concerns, we were then told at a council meeting that their concerns were satisfied. But that wasn't accurate. They had to send a follow-up letter expressing their continued opposition. Our good borough police chief has also expressed his opposition to this measure. I find it personally interesting that none of the council committees wanted to really touch this issue, as no ordinances normally come through committees, and I think that speaks volumes. This doesn't do anything to promote public safety. It doesn't advance community development. It doesn't make our community better or stronger. It's time for council to step up and vote to cease any further consideration of this issue. Just as you voted to authorize the solicitor to draft an ordinance, you can vote to rescind that, and we can get to work for things that really matter to make the quality of life better in Indiana Borough. Thank you.
Hello, hi. My name is Siobhan Arthurs. I live at 532 Locust Street in Ward 2. I just wanted to first touch base. I have a PhD in criminology. I'm a statistician and I do drug and alcohol research concentrated at my career. So I just wanted to touch on some few issues I see with decriminalizing specific to Indiana Borough. First, and two, I'm not naive to the issues of marginalized populations with use, and that's why decriminalization has happened in general. And I can see benefits in medicinal, as we've seen at state levels. But there has been some adverse effects in areas that have that, which includes increasing number of children who consume weed illegally. And emerging adults are especially sensitive, and there's been shown increases in things like sedative use. So for our IUP college students, that would be a particular targeted area. Crime data has shown that even in the most permissive legal environments, minority youth continue to be disproportionately arrested and convicted on marijuana charges. And especially since 2000, rates for those 15 and older have doubled, which would include the population you are decriminalizing, which would be the 18 plus. Looser laws have actually promoted more marijuana use, especially by young and marginalized people who buy out of illegal drug markets. And that's similar to juuling issues we see now in adolescents. There's incentives for youth consumption in illegal markets. It's exacerbated racial problems in our juvenile justice system. And overall, in states that have legalized, like arrests have fallen, but hazard rates for African Americans particularly were unchanged. They're still twice as likely to be arrested on marijuana charges, regardless of decriminalization and or legalization. So realistically, it's done little to change the historical patterns that I believe you are trying to change. There's also a lot of legal confusion around it. Socially, people generally don't understand the difference between decriminalization and legalization. So the misinterpretation will definitely affect our police, and people may be combative to the police because of that. They may also not understand the fine and fee application associated with that because of it. Costs can become difficult, it becomes parental responsibility, and we can have a debtor's jail on our hands. I.e., when people don't pay fines and fees, there can become a jail term associated with that. So long-term issues can still be there. And also the comparisons of decriminalization areas to Philadelphia with a 1.5 million population. I've heard mention of Portugal as a country legalizing drugs across the board. There's 10.31 million there. We're a small little area of 14,000 people. And also the borough lines then are not clear. We know when we're in Philadelphia. However, a large majority of our population may not know when they cross from the borough to White Township, when they may be dealing with municipality police officers versus state police officers, or even know the difference between the two. Those interactions can cause confusion for people in the borough, including our transient population of IUP. Those on probation may misinterpret possible violations that would still apply to them with decriminalization. And research has demonstrated general confusion about decriminalization and legal laws at the larger and state federal level in these situations as well. Time? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I have a letter to read here.
Okay, I'm Bill Simmons, Mayor. The Indiana Area School Board asked me to read their letter one more time tonight, and so I will do that. The Indiana Area School District Board of Directors would like to take this opportunity to clarify our position on the borough's deliberation regarding a draft ordinance on decriminalization of marijuana. The Indiana Area School District Board of Directors, while we respect your authority and service to the community, we believe that this ordinance is not in the best interest of our schools. As such, we oppose the drafting of the ordinance and respectfully request that you reconsider the pace of which you are pursuing this bill to allow more time, input, and perspectives from the various stakeholders in the community. We are hopeful that you respect the notice that we, Indiana Area School District, have fundamentally duty to keep our students safe. This includes being safe from drugs to the best of our ability. The draft language you are considering can have a profound impact on our policies and procedures, as well as send multiple mixed messages to our families. For example, adolescent marijuana use has been shown to severely large studies to lower IQ scores by 6 to 8 points on average. Additionally, in reviewing local and county data for the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, there are some trends worth discussing regarding alcohol, drug, and tobacco vaping use as a collective group. We are hopeful we can have further conversations about the data and how we can work together to provide more protective factors to our students and families while lowering the number of risks factors as students are facing with our daily basis. We are respectfully asking that you continue to include all stakeholders in this process and at the very least, carve out the school zones in the draft language. We have a different set of policies and expectations as a district regarding state established drug-free school zones, and we want this to be specifically inhabited to the borough's language. Furthermore, we have not had time to discuss the impacts the proposed ordinance could have on our school district, as we have not seen the draft ordinance at this time. In a recent article in the Gazette, it was mentioned that the school concerns have been addressed, but we do not believe that it is an accurate statement, as we never provided any opportunity to review the specific carve-out language we requested. We did attend a meeting and ask for the carve-out, but that has been the extent of our involvement. Once the requested information is on our process, we would like to present it to the entire Board of School Directors for review. We think one could argue that drug use, legal or not, in public spaces is always a serious concern. Our goal is not to take a position of whether or not the rules are just or appropriate from a legal sense. Rather, we would like to view this matter from a safety standpoint for our students. We are simply trying to work with our partners to keep students and staff safe. The pandemic, as you are well aware, has brought a tremendous amount of mental health and trauma challenges, and we need to address these from an aligned and collaborative effort. We were hopeful that the borough would discuss more solutions to keep our community safe and our residents from active in pro-social and healthy behaviors. It is also important to note that we have several schools that are not located in the borough, and we would hate to see a different set of rules for schools in the borough and for those which are not. Consistently, our policies and expectations as a district are important. We are not saying we know and can recommend exactly what the penalties should be, but we should all work together to keep the safety of children as a priority to the fullest extent possible when making these decisions. We are simply asking that you recognize that this decision will affect our safety and efforts, and that you go slow to go fast by involving all stakeholders in this conversation. Another layer of this draft policy that the borough should discuss is how the ordinance will, if at all, differentiate between minors and adults. This would also include how each law enforcement agency will enforce this new law. Would the county sheriff's office, IUP law enforcement, borough police, and the state police all be on the same page? And are they planning to operate in the same manner? Respectfully, we think it would be important to know the impact that the borough's decision will have, if any, on all these other entities. We do not have the answer to this question, and it might have already been addressed. We would suggest forming a subcommittee made up of local stakeholders to discuss this further. During one of your most recent meetings, it was mentioned that the district attorney issued some concerns regarding the draft ordinance. As well, which we serve as a gentle reminder that further discussions might be needed at this time. Respectfully, we want to always be professionally and good neighbors with local leadership, but it seems like a further discussion among the various stakeholders is needed at this time to make sure everyone is on the same page and that all viewpoints are considered. We would hate to see anything rush only to produce more conflict, angst, and confusion in our community. We have all gone through a great deal in the past 3 years, and unity, diplomacy, and dialogue are needed now more than ever. In the absence of answers, anger sets in, and we are all going through enough at this current time. Rushing anything might only further complicate the matter and cause a large divide in these polarized times. Let's work together to keep our schools and community safe. It's signed by the Walter Schroth, board president, and all of the board members of the Indiana Area School District.
I hope it's clear to everyone that we do not have a final draft of an ordinance ready for anything like final consideration yet. This is still yeah, those people who think we're rushing, I think if we went any slower, we'd be going backwards. But that's my personal opinion. Anyone else here to address this? Coming to them.
President, members of the council. I no longer live in Indiana Borough, the town I was born and raised in and had the privilege of serving here.
Please, for the record.
I can't hear you again.
Where's my microphone? We need to have your name and address for the record before you begin. Please.
E. Warner. My address is in White Township, 1008 Longview Avenue. White Township 10 years ago, I lived my life in Indiana Borough and having had the privilege of serving as mayor at one point for 8 years. I don't know how people in White Township can be any different than the people in Indiana Borough because I consider us to be one. We depend on your police department to enforce the laws. White Township does not have its own police department. And so when you talk about the use of marijuana, is the most commonly used mind-altering drug in the United States after alcohol. That's a fact. Users can become dependent on or addicted to marijuana just as with alcohol and tobacco. That's a fact. Drug use may affect their finances, their schoolwork, and social life. That's a fact. That's the source of this information from the University of Rochester Medical Center. Want to just make another quick comment or two. 30% of those who use marijuana may have some degree of marijuana use disorder. We can anticipate if we legalize the use of marijuana, there will be the repercussions of having disorders. In 2018, it was more than 15% of those who use marijuana on a regular basis. The results said lower income, greater welfare dependence, unemployment, criminal behavior, lower life satisfaction. And tonight, as we gather here in this sacred place, we know that the population of Indiana Borough is somewhere around 14,000. Population of White Township is around 16,000 plus IUP's population. So the decision that this Indiana Borough Council makes will affect a lot of people. today, but in the days to come. I wish you well in your deliberations.
Thank you.
Thank you all. My name is Walter Schroth, 150 Martin Road, Indiana, Pennsylvania. I'll make my comments very brief. I simply want to summarize the key points that were made in the letter that Mayor Simmons just read. Number one, we must protect the school zones and make them drug-free zones, regardless of whether you're an adult or a minor. That is absolutely critical to the safety and concerns of our students. Number two, we need to have parity and consistency with what we're doing. PAYS data, which stands for Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which is a biennial survey of students across the Commonwealth in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12, tells us right now in Indiana District that 20% of our students have considered suicide. 25% of them have used marijuana, and 50% of them have used alcohol. These are behaviors that we consider to be hazardous. We need to figure out ways which, as a community, we can come together to reduce those hazardous behaviors that our students are currently involved in. The issue of parity, though, is as we approach IU Patty's Day, when Chief Shaw goes around and he finds a party that underage drinking is occurring, if there is marijuana being used at that same party, will those students be treated differently? Will they all receive, under this proposed new ordinance, a traffic summons because they're under 21 and are both illegal to use the substance, either drugs or alcohol? Or will they be treated the same? And then the last thing is, we are going to be looking seriously as a school district at this PAYS data. We're going to try to identify our own programs that we are currently using to reduce those hazardous behaviors, and we're going to develop new programs or new concepts to do so. The people from Penn State who collate that information and provided the graphs that were in the letter, okay, tell us that this is not something that a school district can do on its own, but is something that the entire community needs to participate in. And that community includes this council, the White Township supervisors. We have a couple of commissioners here, and the County of Indiana as well. And so the question that I would ask as you further deliberate this is, how does this current proposal that you have eliminate or reduce those hazardous behaviors of our students, including the use of marijuana by underage students? Thank you.
Sign up. We don't actually have, we ask you to sign in so that we'll have your name for the record, but there's no order, there's no correspondence between that and speaking. It's whoever jumps up first.
Good evening, Council. I think this is just more understanding. I know there's a part on the agenda for discussion with regards to this, and I spoke with Mr. Broad about coming here. Should I wait for that portion or now?
For that portion, actually, rather than as part of the public, yeah. But Siobhan already spoke. She didn't.
3 minutes to her. I want to get, if you don't mind.
Spoken.
I understand that. I just asked a question. It's fine. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I just want to know if I can refer my time to Siobhan so she can finish.
It's not how it works. there anyone else who would like to address us?
Hello, I'm Sandy Waldenville. My address is 90 Story Hill Road, Ernest. I'm the mayor there. A couple of things for you to ponder if you haven't already. What are you going to do about my kids? We have drug problems in Ernest. There's drug problems everywhere. What are you going to do whenever my kids, in whatever circumstance or scenario, are here in your borough with other friends, participating in such a way? What are you going to do about it? They're not borough residents. Does it matter that they're not borough residents? What about the kids from Clymer or Bar Slope or anywhere else in the county? County seat. What you do is going to obviously affect your borough, but it's going to impact everyone. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, this entire notion has me angry with everything that we as a nation, a state, a community have gone through in the last couple of years. And we're finally kind of getting back to some level of being in a state of normal. Don't you think there are more important things to address within your borough itself that won't have a negative effect on the rest of the county, but maybe have a positive effect for those of us who don't live in the borough but are here every day working? I'm a full-time employee with the S&T Bank Corporation, and my job takes me here in your town, on your streets, trying not to hit the potholes. Just saying. But seriously, please, this isn't frivolous. It's nothing that needs to be smirked at or roll your eyes over. People have presented facts and figures and data that are very important. Honestly, it's time for y'all to set this aside, mark it as a mistake, and move on. Thank you.
I guess I've been nominated to come up here. Brenda Arthurs, 898 Chestnut Street, also owner of Wolfie's 560 Philadelphia Street, also in the borough. I just want to reiterate a little bit of the legal confusion. I also think too, we're around young people. They're already mentally taking anti-anxiety, antidepressants just to get through the day. So I'm even wondering on that level, if you add marijuana into that, does anyone know what effect that's going to have? I haven't heard anything about testing. We all know when people get pulled over, they get tested for alcohol. Is there a THC test that the borough is going to pay for so that all the owners of bars and restaurants on Philadelphia Street aren't going to be responsible that they're visibly intoxicated and tested for THC? Because we get fines and it goes against our license. So I'm wondering where the borough is going to come in on that one. Also, I stress the difference of borough to White Township. When I went door to door with my daughter, when she was campaigning, no one even knows where their lines are, if it's even right beside their house or the alley down the street. That's the biggest problem that's going to happen. And you want law enforcement to not only waste the time to do that, to take away from everything else, but now you're going to tie up the court system, the DA's office, for all these small cases of marijuana just in the borough or in White Township because they don't know they were in White Township. Other states that have done this is on the state level, which I think that's what the borough needs to wait for. It needs to be statewide not just in the borough. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address us?
Well, it's 1601 Philadelphia Street. I've been a resident up here in Indiana since 1971, and I've been a homeowner for 40 years. Let's face the fact, I grew up in the 60s and well aware of this stuff. In the 60s compared to now, the 60s was like any of you non-smokers smoking a cigarette. Now this stuff is bad. This stuff could be easily laced with something. There's no two ways about that. You know, and I sat back here watching some people here on this council smirking when some of these people were given their pieces. And there's just no reason to pass this. It's a gateway drug. Any of you with friends or children or grandkids, and if they OD and you have to go to the hospital or they die from something that's laced to this, are you ready to face that? That's it. Don't even pass this thing. Don't even think about it. We got a bad enough reputation up here as it is. I travel the county and I hear things about up here and this marijuana thing. You're making big time all over the county, and I was over on the other side in Westmoreland County. They know about some of you people talking about this, and that's a shame because Indiana used to be and could still be a very nice community as well as the county.
For my time, Tammy Curry, White Township. First of all, I echo what Mr. Greenwald just said. I sat back here and I watched several people up there smirking, rolling their eyes, shaking their head when the former mayor of this borough and an upstanding citizen of this county was speaking. Shame on you. Who do you think you are? Disrespecting constituents, residents, and esteemed elected officials in this county. Who do you think you are? Well, I do want to address something else. A few weeks ago, or was it last week? I don't know. I've lost so much time with all of this. You decided not to remove 2 parking meters for the safety of the children. The safety of the children. So you're real concerned about the children, are you? If you're so concerned, why are you bringing drugs into the borough? Why are we doing this? Do you know, are you aware, do you read anything? Do you know the school districts that are dealing right now with students who are using vapes, marijuana vape pens laced with fentanyl? Do you guys want to be responsible for more deaths? Because I sat and I listened to Commissioner Hess on the radio a few weeks ago saying they are actively after the opioid crisis. They're taking care of it. That, my friends, is a contradiction, a big contradiction. Go ahead, sit there and smirk, sit there and disrespect people. You will not be elected again.
All right. Anyone else? We can keep this up for about 5 more minutes. Move on.
Is anybody on Zoom?
Oh, is there anybody on Zoom? Is anybody on Zoom? Next item on the agenda is an executive session, which we don't need as far as I know, or anything, is our discussion of the nascent proposal. It's not really well-rounded yet. I invited, well, our district attorney to come and address us on this, and we might want to start our discussion from yours, and then you can questions and you can ask us questions.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate your time. I apologize if I seem a little awkward with the glasses. They're not mine. I forgot mine and needed to borrow them. So
imagine wearing borrowed glasses.
I appreciate the opportunity to come down and speak with the Borough Council about this. I had heard about the initial idea of putting together a borough ordinance about decriminalizing marijuana about 2 years ago. Then I again heard it in January of this year at the January meeting. What I found out from there is I called around to a lot of different stakeholders in the criminal justice system, police departments, probation, healthcare, EMS. They heard it the same as I did on the news. When this happened, obviously there's a lot of concerns. I've received many calls in my office about, hey, what's going on? What do you know? And I said, I know what you know. All right. I drafted my letter and I sent my letter down essentially requesting a conversation. I think any important issue, especially when you have a lot of people in the room with great experience and great intentions, having that conversation to find out where we're going to go is important. All right. My letter was not detailed. When my letter was read in here, the statement was made, and I don't know who made it. I'm not trying to call anybody out, that essentially my letter was BS because I didn't put in all of the different possibilities that could happen. And there's a reason for that. Mr. Broad said there's no official ordinance at this point. In watching the meetings, it's my understanding that council's still deciding what we want to do. And there's no potential way for any person to decide, here's all of the potential outcomes without knowing what people are trying to do. And I'm hoping that's what the discussion tonight is for, what we can do. Now, legalizing marijuana, decriminalize it. I understand that, Joe.
For that, because there's been a lot of confusion that we're talking about legalizing marijuana, and that's not what we're doing. In any case, that's never come up.
Are taken for
with our discussion, if you can clarify, let's make sure we're talking about decriminalization, not legalization.
I understand that. However, you can't take away the two when the statistics that people on both sides of the topic are citing involve situations that are both, and the research puts them both together. Okay. However, when you look at what's going on in these situations, all right, the world's not going to end if you pass this borough ordinance. Okay. It's not, right? It's also not going to be the greatest thing ever. It's just not. Neither side of the extremes are really going to get there. I think if we all look at the research and we're all intellectually honest about it, neither of those really horrific or really awesome things are going to happen. All right. But here's what is going to happen. And here's what's been proven in Colorado, in Washington, and the other jurisdictions. All right. You will have an increase in marijuana related DUIs. You will. Every place that has legalized it and decriminalized it, you do have an increase in marijuana related DUIs. All right.
Broken down between places that have been decriminalized and legalized?
No, I do not. The states you mentioned were.
And the states you just mentioned have legalized marijuana, not just decriminalized.
You should also mention other districts.
Great if we, I mean, that's the data that we need, right? What is the relevant data to decriminalizing here in Pennsylvania?
Question. It's a good question. Has Borough Council been looking into that? You will have an increase in marijuana related DUIs, period. Okay. You will have, here's where I gotta use the glasses. You will have an increased use in younger children, all right? Younger children. Now, typically with the PACE study, and I appreciate when you talked about the PACE study, all right, there's a natural trend for children in all grades, right? What all of the research has shown is it's the younger kids that you're going to have an increase in. Not the kids that are really towards the end of their high school career, moving on to college. They've received all the messaging they have, all they're going to get. But those younger kids that are still at that age where maybe they will, maybe they won't, they will have an increased use. You will have an increase in health-related issues, including mental health. Now, I would venture to say we would be very hard-pressed to find anybody that believes we don't need more help in our mental health system. We have a lot of great people in that system wanting to do great things, but it's just not able to deal with everything that's going on. And when you hear about marijuana increasing mental health issues, we're just adding to an already overburdened system. Now, if you decide to decriminalize it, you will have people that continue to use or feel more likely to use unregulated marijuana. And when you talk to anybody in the criminal justice system, what we're seeing on the streets right now is marijuana that's laced with fentanyl, PCP, and we're seeing that more and more every day. So we're not just talking about regulated marijuana, we know what's in there. It's an unregulated item. Decriminalizing it at a borough level will not have any oversight about what people are using. You will increase the likelihood of violent crime related to robbing drug dealers. In Indiana Borough, over the last 2 years, you had a shooting in 2020 where they intentionally robbed and shot somebody selling marijuana. Homicide over on Carriage House, where they intentionally set up a young man who happened to be selling marijuana and killed him. If you decriminalize it and we have more people using it, nature says you will have more people selling it. It's an increased risk. I've heard, I apologize for 1 second. Now, some of the reasons that I've heard, and I guess this is really what my discussion is, what is it that the council is trying to accomplish? Because, you know, I've heard reasons cited. The fines are massive. In our court system, the fine typically ranges from $100 to $300 right now. So we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Jail for a small amount of marijuana. I took a very unofficial poll of people in our criminal justice system here in Indiana County over the last few decades and other counties. I've yet to find a single case of a person spending a single night in jail for a small amount of marijuana. Medical marijuana users being prosecuted. Well, that's not legal and that's not happening. If somebody has a medical marijuana card and are using it under the medical marijuana prescriptions, we don't prosecute them, period. Disparate treatment. I'm going to suggest this. If anybody here believes that we need to change the laws because our police officers are executing those laws in a disparate manner, please speak up. I know the men and women of the police department. Identifying members of the community based upon their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, you have a bigger problem that decriminalizing marijuana is not going to address. So if you think you have police officers that are acting in a racist manner, which I don't believe for a second, you need to address that because this decriminalization isn't going to address that. You're also, what you will have is disparate treatment from individuals that don't understand what the law is. If you have people that say, hey, Indiana Borough, it's decriminalized, it's a traffic ticket. People should have an understanding about what the law is and what's going to happen. And what you may have is an individual that is arrested by a borough officer and cited for the ordinance, but then another individual who's cited by the state police and they're charged with the misdemeanor. Somebody who's arrested by the sheriff's department on a bench warrant and they're charged with the misdemeanor. And you have different people being charged with different things simply based upon who happened to catch them. I'm sorry, Gerald, you had your hand up and I was a little on the roll there. I apologize for that.
Question. When I was, you asked a question.
Police officers on Borough Council, or not on Borough Council, on the police department. Okay.
I mean, if you're done, we can talk about some local data. So I want to be really clear that I'm not in favor of this because I have any feeling that our police chief or any of our police are individually racist individuals. In fact, one of the reasons this comes up is particularly because our police want to be a welcoming community. What is the case, though, when you look at local data, and that our council has, is that marijuana arrests, that Black folks are disproportionately impacted by marijuana arrests. And we know nationwide, the war on drugs has been a failure and has disproportionately affected our communities of color. The bottom line is, why are we doing this? It's better for Indiana to be a diverse community. We are stronger when we are a diverse community. Maintaining barriers that disproportionately impact communities of color, those barriers which themselves were erected purposely for the purposes of oppressing those same people of color. Removing those barriers is what a welcoming community is trying to do. And so,
you're saying that pot being illegal is
saying is
racist.
Historically, absolutely.
Are these local statistics?
Yes.
Minorities?
Yes.
That are being targeted, or?
And this is sort of the distinction that I want to make sure to be clear about. I do not in any way think that Chief Shaw is racist. I don't think any of his chiefs, his police officers do, nor do I think that they act in a way that is based on an explicit racism. I just don't think that. That's not what's happening here.
What I wanted to ask you is,
What I raised my hand to, Mr. Manzi, was I do think it is possible for an institution to end up with data that clearly exhibits a disproportionate impact on communities of color without having individual racists in the room. And it's partly because of these structural issues around the war on drugs, around our marijuana policy. So I just want to be clear. I don't think anybody here today is a racist, or that anyone in our police department is. In fact, they've gone out of their way to be an incredibly welcoming police department. The idea of a welcoming community came really from our efforts several years ago to make sure that our communities knew that our police weren't going to become immigration. We weren't going to get raids from immigration officials. That our police are here to protect our residents. They're here to serve peace, safety, and comfort for our residents.
so are these minorities that are being caught disproportionately, are they citizens of this community and staying here, or are they students that are transient?
That's not in the data. It doesn't.
That's not in the data.
Well, it doesn't.
All of our residents here.
The student population to fill out Indiana as their home on the census. There are constituents. We told them they were.
Okay.
The former mayor mentioned the population statistics. He was slightly in error when he said in addition to those numbers were the students. Students are actually part of those numbers. When we get our data from the Census Bureau, it includes any students who live in, right, and that 14,000 includes any IUP students who live in the borough.
Where it is decriminalized, and that's what they're used to, but they're coming to an area where it's not decriminalized. So we have to conform to what they want to make them more welcome.
Conform to what they want, but I think we should be adjusting our policies to address historical and present day disparate impacts.
And again, I don't believe that Chief Shaw and the police officers are racist. If it's not that, why are they disproportionately affected? Because decriminalizing specifically, what does that specifically help in the minority community? So why doesn't it help non-minority community?
Well, so essentially, this is putting up more people of color coming out of Indiana with more barriers to their success than otherwise.
Isn't that if they want to break them?
It really depends on where I think we want to be as a council. I think the leadership of this council several years ago made a commitment to be a welcoming community, which meant looking at these sorts of policies that disproportionately impact marginalized communities.
Sure, I understand that. What I'm trying to say is, why does this specifically marginalize, like disproportionately affect?
I don't know why the data is that it is. I don't think it's because our police are racist. But I do know.
I briefly looked at what you had given us at, before the meeting, and I believe it was 35% of the arrests were marijuana, something like that. Let's just say for a moment that's the right number. I'm not sure if it is. Let's just assume for a second it is. Right. Well, the point I'm making is decriminalizing and lessening the fine isn't going to change the fact that 35% of the fines that people receive in that demographic are still going to be marijuana related. So all it is reduce the number they have to pay. It doesn't actually stop them from getting in trouble. And in fact, it minimizes the punishment, which one could make an argument for will increase the usage, actually increasing that number in that demographic potentially.
However, right, well, and we can get into this. I don't know if I don't want to interrupt your time as well.
I was seeking.
I mean, I could go back to the beginning to how this all began. Okay, it's me, and I'm sorry, guys, but I brought it up because I've been asked, and yes, the reality is those who are in favor of decriminalization, reducing penalties, legalization are unlikely to come up here and talk because they feel uncomfortable, they feel targeted. And I think their feelings are founded as well because we've gotten a lot of right to know requests requesting their specific names and addresses. And that really re-solidifies my feeling that they probably aren't going to come here and talk, right? So I brought this up to public safety back in February of last year, I believe. 2020, pandemic year, I don't know. So 2020, and then I came back, there wasn't a quorum. We talked about it. I wanted to bring it through public safety because I think that's appropriate to have those voices. And the chair of the committee declined to continue the conversation in that committee. If he wants to talk about why that was, I'm not going to speak for him. And it was asked that at that time, I bring it up for new business. That's what I did. I waited until we were done with our union negotiations so that Pat had time because it is not a priority. They had other things that were a priority. And so I waited, and this is where we are. This is the first time we're even looking at a draft. It's been 60 days since that moment. We're not going fast. This is the conversation, okay? It's better always to look at a document and look through it and read it and not just be talking about these hypotheticals. This is the exact same way the chicken and bees ordinance got started. I had residents asking me about chickens all the time. And yes, they didn't write letters. They weren't here protesting, but they asked me about chickens. I don't want chickens, but people wanted chickens. So I brought it up at the time. Mr. Thoreau was the chair of the committee. He declined to bring it through his committee. And it was proposed then that we start just bringing it up through council. Sarah and I worked on it. We kind of hit a dead end. And then when Ben became chair of that committee, it moved through there. So this is it's a normal process. It's not non-transparent. It's a slow process. Everything we do is slow. So I wanted to bring that out there. There's a lot of conversation about lack of transparency and how quick we're going, but I don't know how we could go any slower because this is our first conversation. Well, everyone has their opinion, right? So that's where we are. And if we look at the data, we have 15 other municipalities in the state that have decriminalized small amounts. And I think what's really important part of this is the paraphernalia aspect, which hasn't been addressed. You have discussed the issues with the fact that, you could have a small amount of marijuana and it's basically a slap on the wrist. That is true. However, with the paraphernalia, which could be as something like a paperclip, of rolling paper, something that you can buy legally in many places in the borough. But as soon as it's used, that becomes a higher offense, correct? Correct. It's 6 to 12 months. and $2,500 in fines according to what I read on the state site. I don't know.
The statutory max is up to 1 year incarceration and a $2,500 fine. However, similar to marijuana, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that goes to jail. Yeah. I would say over the last 2 years, I've yet to see a person be ordered jail time for paraphernalia.
The normal.
The normal sentence would be, so if somebody were convicted of it, you would probably have a sentence of 1 year probation, complete a drug and alcohol assessment with one of our local agencies, comply with any and all treatment recommendations as you would be supervised with the probation department, potentially pay a fine and pay court costs.
Does that go on your record? Do you have a criminal record at that point, misdemeanor?
That would be on your record if you have convicted. Now, in order to get to a conviction in Indiana County, you would have to get through all of the diversion programs that are out there meant to provide early intervention for people who are using drugs. So we have a magisterial district judge early intervention program that we have funded through the PCCD, in which true first-time offenders who are charged with a drug crime, paraphernalia, or a related crime. So for instance, a criminal mischief that was somehow related to drug and alcohol abuse. They would complete a drug and alcohol assessment through the Alcohol and Drug Commission. They would comply with any recommendations, do community service, pay a fine, et cetera. And then the case would be ended in what we refer to as a 546, which is a magisterial district judge early intervention program. We also have probation without verdict, in which, again, you now have an offender that goes and gets drug and alcohol treatment. They're supervised by probation, but there's no sentence in that case. They simply provide those treatment. Then lastly, you have ARD, which many people know through, more similarly through DUIs, but they can complete that program. But all of those programs, the importance of all those programs is providing early intervention and treatment with the hopes of catching folks who may be walking down the wrong path. Is it a situation where they had a bad night and they did something stupid, or is it something where they're really, there's a more serious problem that we want to address? And in all of those programs, we look at not only just the drug and alcohol use, but many times there's another issue with it. They're also dealing with grieving. They're also dealing with some mental health issue. They're also dealing with some other situation. So we try to address all those situations. So a person would have to get through all of that. When we talk about a student leaving IUP with a criminal history, you're talking about somebody that would have to have multiple interactions with a police officer that led to criminal charges. So we're not talking about the one kid that does something stupid while he's over here at college and says, man, I really shouldn't do that again.
Just repeat offenders.
You'd be looking at repeat offenders, yes.
I have arrest data. You probably have conviction data as well. Rates of conviction, demographics.
All sorts of statistics.
Love to see the stats that you have on that. Yeah.
So we don't have this conviction data. So that,
I didn't bring any conviction data with me. What I do know, because Mr. Smith and I had a very good conversation about 2 years ago about this, is when you're looking at the numbers, you need to delve into them. First of all, I believe the arrest numbers, if I'm not mistaken, for Indiana Borough for a small amount of marijuana over the last few years never really rose past 25. Is that what you have, 25, 30, maybe more, maybe less?
a couple of years ago, it has been going down.
You said percent.
I'm asking like number, how many, you said you had arrest date. How many people were arrested for small amount of marijuana last year in your borough?
Fine, I don't have the data in front of me, but I know it's been going down over the last four or 5 years. I think it was close to like 150 or so, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been going down since then. It is important as well, in particular, and I'm glad you mentioned we talked about this 2 years ago. This is not a new issue.
No, I mean it's been popping around, and eventually It just needs to, we need to talk about it and decide what we're doing or not, or people are going to continue to.
With percentages, right? If you have a sample size of, let's say 20, then 7 people is 35%. And any valid research, I know I'm speaking to the choir, any valid research requires a very substantial sample size, typically over 100, probably more. So when you have smaller sample sizes, those percentages mean squat, right?
It would be great to work with your office on looking at some of that data, because there is a lot of data. And in particular, when we're thinking about disparities, a lot of disparities do show up in most data. So it would be lovely to think about why that is. Why is it that we are arresting or convicting more people of color than otherwise? And that's a worthwhile question, but unless we have that data, we can't really ask that question.
And I think the conversation that we had before was why, the why, right? Because as I said, if you believe, and it sounds like nobody's raising their hand saying we have racist cops. I don't believe we do. Nobody's raising their hand saying it, right? So we don't have people, members of law enforcement, executing the law in a racist manner. So then the question is why? One of the things that we talked about was tinted windows, right? That we have people who are in a city where they are less likely to be pulled over for tinted windows. When they leave Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, they're more likely to get pulled over for tinted windows. Then when you pull them over, they happen to be people of color and they happen to have marijuana on them. My response to that is, what better system could you have than have a police officer walk up to where they can't see who's on the other side of the window and treat them fairly? It's not a situation where you're picking people out and saying, I'm going to pull that person over because they're X, Y, Z, et cetera, right? There's a lot of disparities in the criminal justice system. In fact, men are much more likely to get arrested and convicted of crime, but we don't say, let's figure that out too much. And we should.
I've had a dominant position in society for pretty much most of the time, whereas people of color have not. So that's what it's about.
Jail more often?
It's just if you're talking about equality and equity, I think one of those conversations is worthwhile, and the other one probably is.
I think they're both worthwhile.
We want to be a welcoming committee or a community. And I'm thinking with all these statistics, I believe that many people, when they are found to have marijuana, are welcomed by the police. I don't think they're attacked. I mean, if you have a lot of statistics on that to prove. So the fact that we offer so many programs, I think that if you're snagged and held accountable, it actually turns towards positive. So if you lessen the opportunity to hold people accountable, they just walk away and think it's okay. But I do believe that by showing examples of trying to repair people or turn them to the better decision-making process by holding them accountable, I think that's pretty welcoming. So I think if we lessen that, what are we welcoming?
I think it's important to. I think it's important to remember that this is a Band-Aid solution. This is not a holistic solution. The reality is this should be dealt with at the state and federal level. They have chosen not to do that, and we'll see what happens, but we've been waiting for
that. They chose to not legalize it or decriminalize it. They chose that.
But I feel it's not in line with what most people would like to have happen.
Assessment to make. We're sitting in a room full of people that just spoke against it.
There's a lot of people that aren't here that also live in the community.
Because they're not real happy with the fact that they're smoking weed. They're not going to stand up and say, oh, I'm so great, I need to smoke weed.
We're not making it legal. It is just a reduced penalty. That is all we're talking about. So I want to make sure that we're always framing it in that, and we're not saying, we're giving out marijuana to children, because we are not doing that. We are simply talking about reducing the penalties for the possession of small amounts of marijuana, and I would prefer paraphernalia be included in that. And that's all we're talking about. But if you look at the data here on usage with, I went through the PAYS data, and I pulled out all of the counties where there is a large municipality that has decriminalized, because I really want to focus on decriminalization, not legalization. There is a huge difference. Yes, it's more available if you legalize it, right? And so you're going to have different numbers. We have no ability to legalize marijuana, nor are we trying to. So we're talking about decriminalization only. In the information that we have from the PAYS data, which is all available publicly to the state, Center County, that's the home of State College. They decriminalized in 2016. York County is the home of the city of York, also decriminalized in 2017. Allegheny County, city of Pittsburgh, decriminalized in 2015. I chose those because they've been the longest running. There is no evidence based on the numbers, and I'm happy to show them to anyone here, that there is an increase or really any correlation to the decriminalization of marijuana at a local level and youth usage. There's just no correlation. That doesn't go up, doesn't go down. It continues in a random order.
Actually.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that the school board has been suggesting that they are concerned about youth usage increasing. What I'm saying is this data shows from all these other municipalities that there is no correlation between the youth usage and us sitting here and passing an ordinance. Because I want to say,
can I have
the state, this is the exact same information that the school.
Because I don't know many 12-year-olds that are going to tell their principal they just smoke pot at home.
This data, but that's the data that's being used to tell us that it's a problem.
I have data.
So I'm
skewed through the unknown. As you mentioned, there are people here that are in support of this that aren't in the room. There are 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds that are using that aren't telling anyone.
Of course. So those numbers could be higher. Right. But these are the numbers that we're all looking at.
And
people we're looking at.
Have the opposite from State College, which is saying the negative impacts of decriminalization, which everything you're saying.
Well, could you share that information with us?
I'm going to print it out and I will review it the next time around for sure, because right now it's a paragraph, but it's virtually everything that you're stating. This one is conversely saying the opposite. So obviously, depending on what site and what statistic you're reading.
Well, I mean, I'm pulling, I asked where that came from, because this is coming from the state of Pennsylvania and it's an official survey. So do you know
State College from
what organ? A law firm. Okay. So, you know, I don't know if there's bias there.
But you're definitely right to question me, and I'll review it a little bit further, but.
Point out the statistics you provided show that Indiana is decreasing without this ordinance.
The goal of this ordinance is not to increase or decrease. It's not to impact youth behavior at all. And what I wanted to show here is that there's no evidence that it impacts it. Because honestly, most students don't know what the laws are now, which is why they're smoking in the bathroom at school. Because they don't even know that that is probably not a good idea, because they're 14 and they're not making good choices. They don't know that the Borough Council exists. They don't know that we're passing the ordinance. They're not reading the Gazette. This is clearly not going to happen. You know, we can go back and forth on that, but there's no evidence that it correlates. So I appreciate the concerns about the youth. And if there was a clear increase, I think we should all take a step back. But at least on that point, I think we could just put that to bed, that this is not going to impact 14-year-olds choosing to do this.
So you asked the question why a couple times, Luke, and so right. That's the question a lot. Yes. No, you asked. So why do this? I think right. That's the question you asked. Yeah. And I think so. And yeah, you have. And I think it's a good question because and I don't have a 100% answer, but in looking at the data that we have and looking online and doing research like everyone else is doing, you know, it seems the information I keep finding is that when you look across the nation, because this is just national data, that white folk and black folk, or white folk and people of color, are smoke marijuana at the same rates. Okay. And we don't have local data. And if we do, Mr. Manzi, if we have local data on consumption, that would be super helpful by demographics. But when we look at that data across the nation, if we assume that Indiana is representative of the nation, which it may or may not be, but if we assume the same ratios, the issue that we're seeing is that then there are certain people who are residents of the borough who are seeing more arrests for possession of marijuana than the demographics would suggest, right? Because if it's an equal number, right, then we should be seeing the ratio of population should be the same in the arrest record. That's what Joe was getting at. Okay. And the argument that I've heard from a lot of folks is that, well, if you just don't do it, you won't get arrested, right? Which is a fair point. That is a fair point. But what the issue is that if the ratios are the same and the population, and we look at the population, then, you know, it would suggest that people are doing it, but only certain people are seeing the ramifications of that. And I don't know why that is. That's not really, I don't really know. Because all I see is how all the good things that our police do in terms of making it a welcoming community, and all the work that, you know, an implicit bias that our police do. So I don't know why. I can look at the data like everyone else and see the outcome of it. But you then, so I guess, and this is, I think this has come back to you, Mr. Manzi, because I appreciate you being here and talking to us. If there's a misdemeanor, it goes on your record. And some groups are being, for whatever reason, disproportionately affected by this. Reducing it from misdemeanor to a citation, then basically it still sucks for you. You get busted. You got to talk to a dude in a white shirt, and you end up with a fine, right? And the fines range from $25 to $150 in the other municipalities that have done this. And so if we were to put it at a higher fine, it still is it's a burden. But the difference is that when you walk away, you don't have this misdemeanor on your record. And I guess in your point earlier, Mr. Manzi, was that really on the first iteration of this, the first time you are arrested for possession in the current, how often does that result in a misdemeanor being attached to someone? Never.
First time arrest? Never been in trouble before?
For marijuana. Let's not be.
Had they been arrested for other stuff?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that's, so I'm on borough council, and I've gotten pulled over. I've made all kinds of mistakes in my life, right? And so the preceders, I guess the question is how much does that weigh in this, I guess? But if they've never been arrested for marijuana before, how much does it figure in, and what other stuff figures in? I think that helps me understand. If you could flesh that out, like what's behind that question, that'd be helpful.
Maybe if I could put a fine point on it, the percentage of folks that sort of come through that are first time and not first time, I guess. Right?
I don't have that number. And quite frankly, I don't have that number because most of them just end up at the magisterial district level anyway, so they never make it to the Court of Common Pleas. All right. Yeah. A person who never been in trouble before, first time getting caught with marijuana, they would have to very actively choose not to participate in any of the diversion programs in order to have a conviction. All right. So they would have to say, I understand all of these programs are there. I don't want to do it. I'm either going to plead guilty or go to trial. Right. I know one of those people in my 23 years. All right. Yeah. So that's an active choice. Now, a person who has other convictions, depending on what they are, may be eligible for like the probation without verdict program. Other counties call it a Section 17 program. They may not. So I have people who do have some interaction with the law before, they with a small amount of marijuana, and they end up on a probation without verdict program for 30 days.
That usually occurs at the magistrate's office. So they aren't really, they're involved with the criminal justice system, but they're not involved with your office beyond the prelim. That isn't there also a piece of officer discretion that you've seen in your career where an officer is interacting with somebody, they have multiple choices that they could make, right? Like they could elect not to charge, essentially take the drug, throw it away. They could charge something less, maybe a disorderly conduct, or maybe they charge a drug offense and reduce it to a disorderly conduct at the time of the preliminary hearing. Yes, I've seen that. So there is discretion of the officers when they're making it. Now, that could lead to obviously bias issues. If you're letting certain people get a benefit versus others, I understand that.
We all conceded that we don't think that's happening rampantly.
That's happening, but that could
be so bad if everybody got to take advantage of a little discretion. Say we passed this ordinance or made something happen where you didn't get a misdemeanor. Now, well, how's that different from discretion? It's just a small little change in the system.
The question I'm asking, or the point that I was making, was that, yes, I understand what you're saying. The issue is every interaction that law enforcement has its own unique life cycle. You know, if I get pulled over and I'm 100% compliant, yes sir, no sir, hands on the wheel, there's no issue, you know, here's my identification, whatever, versus the individual that basically says, the heck with you, get away from me, I'm not going to comply, you're a racist, you're no good, and we have those people that are essentially non-compliant individuals. So, you know, there are many factors that feed into that level of discretion and what happens.
Can we go back for a second? So, and this is just for my education. You talked about, so it goes to the magistrate. Early in your discussion a minute ago, you talked about it doesn't come to your office, it goes to the magisterial bench. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the magisterial district judge.
Can you, so again, just educate me. What for the individual that is a citizen that's entered into this process, what does that mean for them? I don't know what that means.
So if, let's say I get a citation under the discussion, you pass this ordinance and it's a citation, you're still going to go to the magistrate. It's still going to get filed at the magisterial district judge. Okay. Now, the same is if you get charged with a misdemeanor, ungraded misdemeanor, either paraphernalia or small amount. Those are also getting filed at the magisterial district judge. So for the citizen, there's really no difference either way. Either way, it doesn't minimize.
And then long term, though, what is there a difference? Is there, again, I'm thinking about things that travel with you into your future.
Again, and I think we've talked about this. For the first time offender, they're probably never going beyond that magistrate. It's going to be reduced some way or another, whether it's probation without verdict, they're going to be put on, you know, and it's still a 30-day unsupervised probation. I mean, as long as you don't get in trouble in that 30 days, your record the case gets dismissed, your record gets expunged. Is that still accurate? Yeah. So
I think it's really important that we think about the folks who are not first-time offenders, and to think about it. And if we're talking about race, and I like what I tend to end up talking about here. If we're talking about disparities, people of color show up with a higher chance that they have a record already. So if we're asked why, you know, I'm not sure what the conviction data is going to say. I'm going to guess the conviction data also shows a disproportionate impact on Black folks. I would love to see it, and I think that's important. How many folks are getting through the first-time program, and how many are not? In an age when, you know, driving while Black, walking while Black, my own personal story, I think I told you this before about the tinted windows. I had a girlfriend in college who lived in California, and I went to visit her in California and drove their car for the first time there in California. And they'd had that car for 8 years with tinted windows in the back. And I was in it for 10 minutes and I got pulled over with her for tinted windows in the back. I think if we just got to be careful about assuming it's so easy to show up with no record. I think it should be easy, but again, in an age of driving your girlfriend's car while Black, it's not that easy.
And let me touch on a couple of things. You had some good questions there about, you know, some of the differences. So non-traffic citation, the difference is there's no potential treatment intervention. So under my MDJ early intervention program, there's a requirement that you're meeting with the Drug and Alcohol Commission, you're completing an assessment, you're complying with treatment, you know, so you have some sort of intervention there. Whereas, you know, a traffic ticket, you pay, correct? By having a history of somebody going through those programs, it gives people an idea of, you know, oh, hey, we're on this person's fourth offense. They did the MDJ program, they did the PWV, they did the ARD. Now this is their fourth law enforcement interaction that has led to charges, right? So, you know, that's important information when you want to know kind of who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with somebody who's a college kid's making a one-time mistake versus somebody that just continues to run themselves into the wall, right? But one of the big differences is that ability to provide a treatment intervention to hopefully catch some people before they end up with 6, 7, 10 cases going to state prison. I guess the question I have, we've talked about some of the disparate effects. How's this going to fix it?
I don't think there's a silver bullet in fighting racial justice, right? There's not a one-time fix, and folks that think there are don't understand the real problem.
What part is this going to do in fixing it? Because if we have those issues, marijuana is not the only crime, right? So I would just
shows that Black folks are disproportionately impacted by marijuana arrests over other drugs.
I don't think that's what he meant. I think he means with multiple arrests.
I know, but we should look at that data, because the data we have shows us that actually marijuana, like, it's more disparate with marijuana than other hard drugs, and we should look at the other data for sure.
This conversation is about marijuana. It's not about the other.
Not about other crimes.
Does anybody believe that the more municipalities that pass these type of ordinances might reach the state level and get somebody's attention and possibly cause a change at the state level? That would be a reason to do it. Does anybody agree with that?
Well, at the bottom of this ordinance, it says cannot supersede state law.
I have not seen the ordinance. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, well, a lot of people seem to know what it says for it not being published, but right. Right. Cannot supersede state law, right? It's against state law. So the ordinance to me seems invalidated. And the specific question I have, and this is a question for Pat and Mr. Manzi, is can we even give the chief of police an ordinance to enforce that is in effect superseding state law? Is that a legal thing to ask him to order his?
It becomes a law enforcement tool that our borough officers can use within the municipality.
It's not what the state law is, right?
There's no noise ordinance in state law, but we enforce it.
Is there a noise law in state law?
Pennsylvania State Police enforce noise ordinance.
It's a section of disorderly conduct.
I understand the point you're trying to make, though. But if there wasn't a state law in regards to it, then local ordinance sounds like it would have a much better place, right? What I'm getting at is it is against state law. If the ordinance cannot go against state law, then what is the point of this piece of paper?
What's the point of any state legalizing marijuana? It's against federal law.
Legalized it.
It's still against federal law.
I'm a little rusty on my exact constitutional words, but I do believe
Against federal law. There is a tricky area.
they're violating federal law and they should be punished.
Wait around for everyone to do what the majority of people would like them to do.
Majority
of the United States, from the Pew Research Institute, 60% support full legalization, 31% support medical, and 8%
when
support.
that goes, then
That's true. And I'm not going to doubt you. I haven't looked at it. What difference does it make? It's against state law right now. Regardless of what we want it to be, it is against state law. And if this ordinance cannot supersede state law, then the ordinance is null and void because it's different than the state law. No?
and it puts our law enforcement in a liability position
It changes
possibly.
how we enforce those sorts of infractions. It doesn't legalize it. It's not legal. This does not make it legal.
Right? That's what we're talking about. Changing the penalty.
I don't know. How specific is it?
Can't make it. My understanding is that you could not pass an ordinance that would be higher than state law.
Okay.
So like, let's say Indiana Borough wanted to pass an ordinance that said, all right, if you get caught with marijuana, it's going to be a felony and you're doing 20 years in jail.
Okay.
Would you disagree with me on that?
I agree with that.
So, but what we have seen with the other municipalities is that you can kind of step back your enforcement, your penalties.
Legal DUI drunk limit.
No.
Why is this different? We're changing it to make it less restrictive. Yes. So raising the legal drunk line is changing it to be less restrictive. We're not allowed to do that. So why are we allowed to do this? And I mean, and if we are, we are. I'm just trying to figure out what's the difference.
He was upset about it, wouldn't he?
Is all you're doing. All this, all any decriminalization is talking about is altering the penalty versus altering the, nobody here is saying that smoking marijuana is ever going to be legal.
I'm talking from a decriminalization standpoint. It is illegal in the state and we want to make it, we want to change the punishment for it in the borough. But isn't the punishment set by the state?
Range of punishments, right?
State?
State law is set by the state, yes. Right?
Set by the state.
State statute.
Law.
It's a mandatory minimum.
No mandatory minimums for marijuana.
Okay, would
So
that?
it's not state, so it's not.
Mandatory minimums are gone.
So there is. It's not set by the state, the punishment. If there's no mandatory minimum, then you could, you would still be obeying state law by telling someone you're not punishing, correct?
Telling.
If I got caught in Westmoreland County, would my fine or fee or whatever the penalty is be exactly the same if I was caught in Lackawanna or whatever that county's called?
Assuming no
Assuming there's no ordinances. So what I think he is asking is it the same penalty no matter where you are in the state of Pennsylvania, barring out these few places where it's been decriminalized?
Right.
There is no minimum penalty, there is a maximum penalty.
I think that's what we were trying to get at, right, Luke?
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, who sets it, right?
The judge, whether it's a magisterial district judge or a common police court judge. And I know I've seen this in my history. I'm sure you have. The $1 fine. Guy comes in, small amount, paraphernalia. Guy pleads his case. Judge says, look, I'm going to give you 1 year probation. I'm going to give you $1 fine.
So if we can assume,
or he's going to give a $300 fine, depending on what he feels is just and right.
And so would we be taking away some of that discretionary? Now, and again, let's assume a perfect world for this conversation, okay? What?
It's moving the discretion to the interaction with that individual.
They could throw away the baggie. So they already have the discretion.
As a council, choosing to push for this because we believe more discretion is better.
And then throwing it away and not writing the ticket.
That's a choice, right? But right, anyone can do that. You can just ignore all of the crimes
If you
people are
advertise
committing.
that you have a less penalty, you're going to encourage worse behavior.
I'm not sure that the war on drugs would pan that out. You know, I don't think that's happened, right? Like there's a lot of really harsh penalties that people still do drugs
that are horrible and illegal, despite the So I'm not that. I think that's logical and it would work for the vast majority of us in this room across the board. But I don't know that that's necessarily borne out, unfortunately.
But isn't that what we're trying to help the logical? The pathological problem children are not going to listen.
We have a community that we have everybody. We take that's just our nature. Yeah.
Mr. Manzi, can I ask Bob a real quick question? Mr. Manzi, with regard to driving while impaired, whether or not they pass this ordinance, that will have no impact on that issue, correct?
I disagree with that. The research has panned out.
What I meant is, I understand, I know the research and I happen to agree with you on the research about you see increased rates of driving while impaired. I agree with that. What I meant was that this ordinance or whatever, and they don't have an ordinance yet, but whatever ordinance they may come up with, okay? That, when we say it won't supersede state law, if I decide that I'm going to go smoke a joint and I'm going to get in my car and drive down Philadelphia Street, there's no reduction on that. It's still going to be a DUI, right? Correct? And if I am employed in a profession that I know that I cannot smoke marijuana and I'm subject to drug tests, I'm an over-the-road trucker, I have a CDL, etc. That's not gonna, this will not impact that, correct? Based on your understanding?
It will not change the laws that are on the books for the DUIs and all that. It will have the effect of more marijuana-related DUIs. It will cause the need for more police to be on the road and dealing with those cases. It will cause a need for specialists in the field of detecting drug use in drivers and testing.
You're talking, again, you're quoting the data that's both legalized states and decriminalized states, right? When you're saying will, so you're talking about in states that legalize, in communities that legalize. So that will, I just want to be really careful because I don't think you can actually talk about that data here.
What I think the main concern is,
that's not what we're doing.
Right. But
agency is making the use of marijuana more okay. That's what happens.
That it's likely, there's a likelihood, but we sort of appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise. You're telling us that something will happen here when the data you're citing doesn't show up here, and I just want to be really clear about it.
From like a Pennsylvania municipality such as Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, that has decriminalized. There's 15 places that have decriminalized in the state. Is there evidence that has increased use? Because like I don't see it in the PAYS data. Do you see it in other data?
To double check that, my understanding is, like I said earlier, your 12th graders are going down, your 8th and 10th graders are staying the same or going up in most of those municipalities. I would have to double check that. DUI related, I'm not sure. What I looked at is long-term. Obviously, if we want more information, we want people that have been dealing with this longer. Colorado, Washington State. And yes, there is a legal difference between the legalization and the decriminalization. However, if we're going to address a situation that we're going to want to look at all of the data. And the legalization, as we talk about, and whoever said it, the kids aren't out there reading the Gazette and reading the law and deciding what to do. They don't know the difference between decriminalization and legalization. They hear it and they say, I get to smoke pot.
It's so important that here at this council, we are not trying to conflate these two. In the community already, there is an idea that we're talking about legalization. And that's why I'm trying to be so particular with you to not conflate these two, because that is not what we're trying to do. And it's a real problem in the community if people think we are. That's exactly what you said will happen. People will be like, oh, it's legal.
What is the... I think that's means that it is extremely important that you stick to the real evidence when you're talking about the situation, that you don't try to compare apples to oranges, because the situation in Colorado is extraordinarily different from the situation in Pennsylvania at this time. If you have data on the consequences of decriminalization in Pittsburgh on DUI, if you have data on the consequences of decriminalization in Philadelphia, that is relevant to our consideration. Data from Colorado is not appropriate any more than, it's hard to imagine a good analogy for how bad that data is.
And I would respectfully disagree that data means nothing. I do agree that the legalization and the decriminalization are two separate legal issues. However, because of the youth of decriminalization in government entities, I do think it's important to look at some of those. If one of the purposes we're talking about is, hey, the more municipalities that do it, maybe the state does do it, and we're trying to get there. I would agree they're two legal things. I would disagree that we should throw out those numbers wholeheartedly.
Very good point. If we're hope.
The current situation.
They are both situations in which government bodies had said marijuana is more okay to use.
Gerald, maybe you know, Mr. Manzi, maybe you do. What is the Pennsylvania area that has had the longest period of decriminalization?
You probably know that more.
Yeah. I believe it's like 14, 13. It's on this sheet here. Let me see.
2014.
The statistics for Indiana County.
I didn't use. Yes.
Similar question that
I did not compare them because they're incomparable in my opinion.
What would be the most comparable to us?
As far as the municipalities that have decriminalized, did you get the email I sent with the? Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, there is Fullcraft, 6,600 people, Phoenixville, 1,600 people. As far as small municipalities, Steelton, 5,900 people. So these are communities similar to ours with a police department that would probably be similar or smaller to ours with the same issues of, I mean, we are going to have issues. This is the one, like, I think Chief has an extremely valid point, which we need to watch out. And that's why I definitely wanted it to go through public safety, because there's going to be an enforcement like confusion. And just like anything we do, we're going to pass, we're talking about LERTA tonight. There's going to be confusion on that. It's difficult to get detailed information out to people so they understand that.
2021, 2020. I mean, there's not a track record.
That's why when I gave you the data, I picked that at least had 1 year or 2 years of PACE data.
What I'm getting at is to Mr. Manzi's point, what data are we looking at then? If we can't use legalization and decriminalization is not a good comparable because it's only 2 years old.
I know it's larger. It's a university town. They also decriminalized quite a while ago. So we have more years of data there.
In Philly, but legalization is more comparable than other things also.
I don't think so.
Into a store and I can buy it without going through any hoops. That means that I can go and I can buy as much as I want. Okay, just like I can go to the liquor store and I could buy alcohol and I could give it to a minor. It's that easy. It's still not as easy here because we haven't changed the laws. We've changed what we choose to penalize.
I think the message that we're sending is more negative than positive as a community for safety. I don't really want to put my name on this and say that I encourage it or condone it whatsoever. I would prefer that people choose. Obviously in my utopian mind, but we are here to make choices for the public and the safety, and just by lessening the punishments, we're condoning it and encouraging it. And kids are going to hear the word illegal or illegal. They're not going to worry about decriminalization. They're going to just flock here. We're going to get more people selling weed. We're going to have more issues that you're concerned about with safety and black markets.
I know Mr. Brown wants to move on, but there were some specific concerns that the school board had brought up with regards to carve-outs and drug-free zones. And in particular, it's a similar question that you were asking about DUIs. As far as I know, we don't have paper, we don't have but the ordinances that these decriminalization ordinances, as you're aware, it's still illegal for children, for minors, right? Does it change that interaction for people who are under 21?
I haven't seen a copy of the draft ordinance. I'm not sure what the council is considering.
We haven't considered anything in that particular issue has not been addressed in it yet. However, it seems to me that drug-free zones would still remain drug-free zones. This ordinance would not in any way affect that.
Solicitor who read this last line, which is in every single ordinance, that it does not supersede state law, indicated very clearly to Peter, myself, Walter, and Julia that was enough, that if we wanted to have additional language about school zones, we could, but legally it covers it, and we are not impacting school zones, any sort of drug-free zone.
And facts included, there's increased citations to minority people of color. So, I mean, from 2009.
Talking about school zones, I think we were talking about the impact on school zones is that this does not supersede it, and the solicitor very clearly said it does not supersede it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the issues that the district has is that the inconsistency
it doesn't affect school zones Does it matter if the school is in White Township or the borough if it doesn't impact the school zone?
But I think it does. Again, it goes to the impact. So I've got a student high, I have students in senior high. One is in White Township, and one is in Borough. And without the borough taking a strong stand, even whether it's legally significant.
You feel that the borough ordinances impact how students behave in your schools?
How students behave.
Mhm.
From my perspective, in enforcing this policy.
How would it impact the student policy if we were not allowed to enforce it in your zone?
Okay, because when we find drugs in a school,
Mhm.
okay, the first person that is called is the police.
Right.
Okay, and so if the police come, yes, I understand Bob's position. It could be something stupid that it did, and he shouldn't have done. But going into the junior high would be different than going into the senior high.
How would it be different?
That's not the advice of your solicitor either. That it's not, it's the same because it's a school zone, it's a state protected zone, and this ordinance has no bearing on it whatsoever. If our officers came into the building, they would enforce the school zone state policies. This has nothing to do with it.
The minors.
Yeah, and the other thing, Casey, on that case data,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to clarify that it happens biannually, every 2 years.
Right, yes. I have,
So,
yeah.
so
I don't have a
so
thing to put up.
2015, 2017, 2019, and 2021. So if people or other municipalities passed it in 2017, I believe it's one of them did. Here's data. The person or the group that did it in 2015, with our resident math teacher here, statistically, 2 data points doesn't make a trend. Correct. So,
If they, in reaction to, right, you're saying that the reaction will be immediate, right? They're gonna hear it, they're gonna react. We should see an uptick. It's actually going down in both of these, so.
To close, because we do have other business on the agenda for this evening, and it's getting very late. We're obviously not going to make any decisions tonight. The next step is not even clear, but we've had a lot of input tonight and a lot of good discussion that can inform our thinking as we proceed forward. And people come back with relevant new information to us. But statement somebody feels an absolute need to make.
What is the timeline? I would like to know.
Whatever it's, one,
because I don't want to do this forever, if I'm going to be honest with you. I would like it to draw a conclusion. I mean,
As we have so much public comment, so we're talking it out.
and that tells everyone when they need to have their associated information by. And so people have.
Speed up, and we're getting messages from all over places to slow down.
There's a difference between hurry up and know where the finish line is.
Like, I think we need a process, and I think that's what we need to discuss.
Process, I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's the right question.
At this point, we need to assign this issue to a committee.
That didn't want it.
Recommendation.
Speak on that?
I'll speak if I could. Friends, I sincerely respect the opinion and the perspective of every person in this room. And I echo Councilor Smith that in 2019, when I became chief of police, I created a message to our community that sits on our website that says, welcome to the police department. My family and I are honored and humbled for the opportunity to serve you. Indiana Borough is a welcoming and vibrant community and place of significance. And then I go in to talk about what makes us diverse and so special. If anyone wants to read the full, it's on the police department's homepage. I also have a reading list that includes Ibram Kendi. I've seen him speak in person in Pittsburgh. I have read not only Stamped from the Beginning, but The New Jim Crow, and I've also read Allies and Advocates Creating an Inclusive and Equitable Culture. I sit on the Indiana Voices of Equity Board, and I'm also a member of the NAACP. The police department in Indiana Borough has one of the most robust social justice programs and initiatives that exist in the state of Pennsylvania. So I appreciate when members of council say that although we're acknowledging our bias, as everyone has a bias, and any conversation that I have with you comes from my seat as the chief of police and public safety. And so with that, I would say to you, I have already expressed to the Public Safety Committee that I cannot comfortably say that public safety in Indiana Borough will increase if we decrease the penalty for marijuana. Therefore, I have asked members of the Public Safety Committee to not have this discussion in public safety. In taking my oath of office, February 1st of 2019, I spoke to our community and I said, I will always be a great steward of your funds, but I will never do anything reckless to harm the safety of Indiana Borough. And I'm not suggesting that this conversation is reckless. I'm just suggesting that it's not coming from the chief of police or any member of the Indiana Borough Police Department. We're not requesting this conversation. We haven't asked for it. And I'm not seeking additional tools at this time. But if I ever were, because it could increase public safety, I certainly would feel comfortable to bring it to this committee. I'd also like everyone in the public to know that my experience with Indiana Borough Council for the past 3 years has been positive in that every conversation we've had, I've felt I've had everyone's full attention and everyone, I believe, is acting within their own heart. Yesterday, today, I believe that wholeheartedly tomorrow. So this is why this conversation I've asked not to come through public safety, because I, as your chief of police, don't believe with any certainty that this will increase public safety in Indiana Borough. But I certainly recognize that there is disparate treatment nationally. I certainly recognize that traditionally police departments have enclosed systems. And I have been working as your chief of police to create a more open system. And I believe I can back that up. And I don't believe you're going to challenge me on it because we've had these conversations before. So, but I also have questions. I have actually some questions that I prepared for a discussion tonight that I think would benefit us all just to learn together in keeping with an open system approach. But I certainly, in Dr. Broad's comments, don't want to extend this meeting. But to Councilor DeViser's point, I would like the opportunity to publicly ask council all of these questions. So I too would like this conversation to at least be forwarded in a public setting to where I know that I could ask these questions. It is not to put anyone on the spot. As a matter of fact, I don't want answers today any more than I want to be put on the spot with something that I may not be prepared to answer. But I want you to have the questions and I want us to have this discussion together so that we can all learn. I appreciate the support of District Attorney Manzi, Solicitor Doherty, Mayor Simmons, and every member of council. But respectfully, that's why this is not, I've asked not only the public safety not engage in this conversation, but I've asked every member of public safety to vote against this ordinance because I, as the chief of police, am on record saying I can't guarantee it's going to increase the safety of Indiana Borough. Therefore, it's not something that I would want any member of the Public Safety Committee to champion. But I say that with the utmost respect to everybody in this room. And if Indiana Borough Council passes an ordinance, it will become the leadership mission of the members of the Indiana Borough Police Department to as effectively and efficiently provide for the safety of this community as possible. So thank you.
That we have an ordinance in front of us, we can either committee, and the only other logical committee is community development.
Doesn't have, the planning department does not have a strong opinion on this. So we don't have advice from, I mean, they might, but they've not shared it with us. So we don't have the benefit or we don't have anyone telling us otherwise. So we have no reason not to accept it. But I will also say to the public that's here, there's a lot of discussion among the public about, moving too fast or moving too slow. But if it comes to community development, we will move it through our process and it will then come to council. It'll either be voted for on in the community development committee. If it passes from community development, it will come to the council for further discussion, right? Because I mean, all of our ordinances have to be discussed, and there'll be more chance for public comment. You all have our email addresses. You can reach out to us, you can come and talk, but it will come here, and it will likely be voted on. And I think the thing that everyone should be cognizant of then is that it'll be voted on, right? And so
the first vote would be to advertise it, and then a month later we would vote on it.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to skip the steps here, but my point simply is that it will come to a head at some point, right? And that there will be a vote, and it'll either be voted down or it'll be enacted, but it will come, right? And so I think that's the thing that folks need to kind of wrap their heads around a little bit if it comes to community development. And so we don't have a reason not to take it, but it will move through the normal process, which you all are encouraged to engage with. So please, come talk to community development when it's on our agenda, come back to council, write emails, etc.
So a potential timeline might be, if you guys are going to take it in your next April meeting, it would maybe be on your agenda next April meeting. And if you were able to come up with a draft that you were going to suggest to council, then we might see it for it would be the May meeting. That would be before we would see.
That would probably be the fastest, right? Because the other part of this could be that we could ask that it come back for a larger discussion, because community development has done that in the past on these things that that we feel sort of have an effect beyond us, that and where there's a lot of different opinions at the table. Because Chief Shaw mentioned that he had several questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, and so I think that would be to have a larger, more accessible conversation involving those questions. I think it'd be at some point it'd be wise for us to share a draft with Mr. Manzi to get sort of more thorough. I mean, you've provided a lot of information, which is appreciated, but to get a more thorough sort of feedback on it. So that I think there's a couple of other steps in between, but I mean, that would be a process question.
Pastors, chief of police, district attorney, school board. We've had pillars of the community speak out against it. So whose consideration are you seeking?
There's a lot of folks that aren't here in the room.
To get them here. No,
I don't think you've been recognized.
How do we get them here then? How do we hear their voice? Because they not a single.
This is a council meeting. Thank you.
Spoke out for this to me, and all of the people I've spoken to, not one.
We've had folks speak.
Dozens of people speak to me in favor of it. So obviously, we have different friends.
The community, the people that you look to in times of crisis, they're speaking out against this. Why don't whose are you?
So I'll basically my point is simply that you asked about the process, and so it was offered to public safety. Public safety has very clearly and I think reasonably so they don't want it. It was then suggested that community development take it. So
the options was we just don't talk about it anymore. That was one of the things that Peter said.
I guess that's my point. What I was saying is that then it continues to fester because this has been coming around for 2 years, and so my goal is always to be done with things. And so basically it will. My point simply was not to be belligerent or threatening or anything else. It's simply to say that it will then come to council and council will vote on it. And folks, I think you've been pretty clear in sort of what you just said about your sort of thought on this, which is I think fair and legitimate, but other folks are going to have other constituents speaking to them and they will vote in the interest of those constituents. And that'll be the decision point, right? I think I think you were asking that question. And so I think that's, at least for me, that's the answer to it.
At some point, enough time has passed that a decision needs to be made. And I'm not saying it's right now. I'm saying what is the timeline? Indefinitely is forever.
E3, we have in the past, many years ago, we required a vote to extend the meeting beyond 9 o'clock. We only have one item to be voted on tonight, but we do have a few other things that need to go through. Unless we're going to make progress tonight, I would like to call this discussion complete for now. when nobody wants to rush into anything. There are a lot of issues that have been brought up tonight that need to be considered. There are things that haven't been brought up yet that need to be considered. And we certainly appreciate the contributions of all those people who feel that there are things that we need to consider.
I would like to at least close my comments by first of all, thanking the Borough Council for a discussion. That was the whole purpose of the letter I sent is we have a lot of people with a lot of information and we're putting information around. Do we consider studies in Portugal or studies in Colorado or Center County UGS stats? I mean, it is important that we look at all that. This is not just a simple issue of, is it a fine? Is it a misdemeanor? You know, looking at the effects on mental health, looking at the effects in juvenile usage, looking at the effects of increased marijuana-related DUIs. So I want to thank the Borough Council for taking the time to look at that. And Mr. Smith and everybody on here, my office is always open. I firmly believe that the justice system works when the justice system is fair to everybody equally. That's why when you look at the policies I have in my office, independent of what the person has, you're looking at most defense attorneys in this county come in and say, I know the charges, I know the facts, I know what the expected outcome is, independent of race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or anything. I want to his work in the borough. Chief Shaw is who I consider probably one of the best police chiefs in the state of Pennsylvania. And his opinion means a lot. And his opinion sometimes goes against what common law enforcement looks at. I recently sent over a plaque to Chief Shaw. His program with the implicit bias was recognized nationally across the country. I think that's important. And that goes to the value of where Chief Shaw and the police department are. So my office is always open. I will happily sit around. Gerald, me and you sat around looking at numbers. I love looking at numbers. I'll happily do it. If we're seeing issues that need to be addressed, it is important that they're going to be addressed. I am always happy to sit down. I want to address those because every study after study after study says when the justice system is perceived fair, people are more likely to not offend, lower recidivism, better treatment, and that's what we all want. So please feel free. I love having good, honest discussions, and I think disagreement is important. I think disagreement and based upon things is important, and coming up to a very good resolution for the betterment of everybody is important. So my doors are always open. Email me, send me a Facebook message. However, you can probably see me at the Little League field all the time. But again, thank you very much. I do appreciate all the time and effort you're putting into this. Thank you.
We're going to move ahead with the meeting. We next move to committee reports. I don't know of anything coming out of administration. Our chair of administration is not with us this evening. Community development does have a proposal for us.
So we have a motion to advertise the proposed ordinance for the local economic revitalization tax assistance program. There is this is a motion to advertise, and the ordinance is in your packet.
Does include the suggested language from the county. The school district has already passed a similar ordinance. I worked with Solicitor Brudash, and that language was added.
We have it coming out of committee, so it doesn't need a second.
Came out of committee, so we don't need
right. Doesn't need a second. Seeing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Carries. Anything else from community? Else from community development? Is there anything from public safety?
Anything pressing right now?
We might announce that the pothole hotline is open.
You stole my thunder. I had that on my thing. That's okay.
Public safety.
Nothing to report.
Where is that? Shade tree.
Meet Monday.
Okay, they meet Monday. All right, Nicole, you're up.
Attend the PALRAS conference last week in State College. Met with a variety of different managers.
Could I ask the people who are conversing, please step out in the hall? The acoustics in here are lousy.
Like I was saying, we got to talk with different managers from, borough municipalities and townships, some old managers that I ran into. A lot was on the ARP funding, different ideas about council sizes, throwing that out there.
From Third Ward, I like it.
And the other thing I want to point up, the Rotary Club sent me an email during the cleanup for America on April 2nd. They're going to be doing some volunteer work to paint on 7th Street, the black pillar things, the bottoms of them. Yeah, to clean that. They asked to do that as a volunteer, and then I had the contracting parking permit. We wanted to make sure we put that out there. That is now available for contractors per vehicle. It's the $100. They will prorate it. It runs August to August. We had some inquiries on that. So that is up and running if they want to go down to the parking garage to get their permit. Also, the pot hole hotline is posted on our website with the phone number to call, also a service request form that can be filled out. Now, I do want to make note that this is not going to happen within the next week or so. We can't get the material till late April, so people just please be patient. We'll get to it. We'll get the list started and get as much. What's that?
Oh, sorry. Late April. Is the plant not open until then?
Yes, the patching's not available till then. So, which hopefully within a couple weeks we can get the idea of what the bad spots are, which we're getting a lot of calls, a lot of Facebook requests. So we'll continue to monitor that. And that's it.
Questions? All right, Chief.
This weekend. Be prepared for the activity with our partners, but we are asking and hoping for a peaceful weekend. I would want all of our residents to know that they could call us 24/7 with any concerns. We'll certainly be available, and we ask everyone to be a good neighbor. I have a letter that was drafted for our IUP student residents, and to save this council some time, I'll just ask that it be posted on social media, and we'll just direct you to that. Finally, on Monday, 2 Pennsylvania state troopers were killed on I-95 in a traffic crash. They were on the side of the road. So I want to extend my condolences to the families of Martin Mack, 33 years old, and Brendan Siska, 29 years old, and all of our members of the Pennsylvania State Police who are going to be impacted by that. I thank you for your time and efforts and everything that we've discussed tonight and that we will discuss, and I sincerely an honor to serve with everyone in this room.
Questions for the chief?
I have nothing.
But he already said it. Just so that our residents know, because people do ask the question, the state police horses will be in town. Although from our perspective, we have the benefit this year, they're going to keep them down at Mack Park, so we won't have horse manure in our parking lot out here. And next, I was at a meeting this afternoon of the Borough Active Transportation Steering Committee. The next step is to determine what the public feels are the most important issues in making the borough more friendly to walkers, cyclists, and bus riders. And to that end, a survey is being prepared and various ways of carrying out the survey are being explored. As you know, it's very difficult to reach the public because the public can't be counted on to read the paper or listen to local radio or anything. And one proposal would include having borough council members distribute the survey instrument in their own wards. I thought that was an interesting idea. I don't know much about other people, but I have not normally gone door to door in my ward except when I've been running for office. Given how difficult it is to reach a substantial portion of the population with anything, I think this might just work. Please let us know what you think. And that's what I have for my report. The report. So it's the American Rescue Plan and LRTA, but we just passed LRTA. So, well, we voted to advertise, excuse me, we voted to advertise it.
Just will continue to work with staff and present.
And coming up on the agenda in April, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Nice. Adjourn.
As well. Yeah, geez, what a lot of pressure.
What's that?
Just what a lot of pressure on you.
I know.
I know, I saw it.
Sometime in the afternoon, I get Commissioner at 10:30.
When he gets up and leaves.
Okay.